Hello, welcome to the Viewpoint. I am Mahmoud Mboj. As you can see, we're still wearing our masks when we are presenting programs, even though I do not have anybody here with me, but still we have to get used to the idea of wearing the masks all the time, really. The COVID-19 pandemic, of course, found us in a transitional phase. We embarked on a whole range of reforms, and we've also established commissions to take an audit of what happened to Gambia during the 22 years of Jammeh's rule. And in that fight, when we defeated Jammeh in 2016, the diaspora was a formidable force. We can even call it the Foreign Legion. They kept us on the agenda, on the international agenda, and were supportive all the time. So they were a formidable force during Jammeh. But now in a post-Jammeh, what role for the diaspora? And also we are in this COVID-19 pandemic, and everybody is talking about there would be a new normal. So in this new normal, how would the diaspora help the country for that elusive economic progress that we want? Today, my guest on the Viewpoint is in the United States of America. We're doing this virtually, as it's the norm these days. He is in Atlanta, Georgia. His name is Mr. Musa Jeng. He's an accountant by training. And I understand that he's known as the political strategist during the struggle, what we call the struggle, in our drive to get rid of Yahya Jammeh, everybody outside the organization. So you had to have your strategist, and Musa Jeng was one such person. He was a political strategist. And now he joins me on the video link, this video interview from Atlanta in Georgia. Mr. Musa Jeng, welcome to the Viewpoint.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mboj. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering right now, given the COVID-19 situation, and in the Gambia recently, we've had this surge. Of course, in the US, you've got enough on your plate, but you must be worried with family and what's going on here.
Mr. Mboj, absolutely, no doubt about that. Few months ago, going all the way back to February, March, here in the US, we all went through it emotionally, lost jobs, the shelter program, the lockdowns. We were all in our homes 24 hours. And of course, Gambia was always in our mind at that time. But now more than ever, I believe emotionally, we are extremely concerned because we know the kind of health infrastructure we have back home. And also what I would call sometimes the attitudinal lapses from folks back home. Even when I talk to loved ones going back to February, March, and the whole attitude was that kind of a thing. But now that we're seeing people are getting hospitalized, and unfortunately people are dying, we are much more concerned emotionally.
Absolutely. But how regularly do you get news? What do you make of the government's response? How has it been handling this pandemic? You've talked about the health infrastructure, obviously, really in parlous state. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt about that. And then when we talk about the attitude, most of us have been quite concerned that we're not taking the regulations, the safety regulations seriously. That's all of it. But how do you think that the government has been handling these shortcomings?
See, one of the things that we have to take this whole COVID thing and put it in perspective. Most of the countries, whether you're talking about Western Europe, whether you're talking about the United States, they've had their problems. This was something different. It was complex. It was difficult. There was no template that a government can look at and see this is the way that we should react. The government, they were getting advice from the World Health Organization. They've had the opportunity to see the ravage that is happening in Western Europe, whether it's in Italy. They've had that opportunity. Unfortunately, I don't think they did everything that they could have done. I seriously believe that they could have done much more. Now, if I were to put a later grade, I would give it a D. They did the things that they were supposed to do. From the beginning, they took the guidelines. There was the shutting down. There was the talk of masks, and we all saw how it all kind of evolved. It became like giving rice, tomatoes, feeding. Before you know it, the whole thing was politicized. Again, not recognizing, I believe, even though people were dying in other countries, I seriously believe the government could have done more. But again, there is also what I would call the average Gambian individual responsibilities, their attitude towards it also. I think that is what is that is what has really put us in this situation. There's a failure of leadership, and then Gambia, the average Gambian also, even up to today, I think their attitude towards it, it really doesn't help the situation at all. Now, one could say there haven't been a lot of sensitization. The government hasn't really done a whole lot, which they have not. If you remember, even the first allocation that was done by the government, the $500 million, before you know it, it was politicized. It was about environment. Should they have violated it? Then it got to the National Assembly. We all saw the politics of what I would call the state of emergency. It was politicized. At some point, it was 90 days. They said 45 days, and then 21 days. And again, the COVID, there was a failure of leadership from the executive, failure of leadership from the National Assembly, and the attitude of the average Gambian. All of that contributed to where we are today, unfortunately.
That's and that's a formidable coalition. the government on one side and the people there and the like. So this is it. But why is it so? I mean, we're facing this huge problem. The whole world, we've even seen, even the so-called developed countries have struggled to deal with this. And yet, what do you attribute this reaction, this response from the government, from people? What do you attribute it to? What's going on here?
First and foremost, I think from the government end, I think there is seriously lack of leadership. Unfortunately, I don't think that President Barrow, I like the man, he's a good man, but he hasn't demonstrated. I mean, in an emergency like that, we're talking about a war against COVID, against a virus that nobody can see. At this particular juncture, just like the United States of America, we're going through that as well. There is lack of leadership. You look at Trump and his shenanigans and his gimmickry, and that is why the United States is in this situation. In the case of the Gambia, I believe that President Barrow has really failed in taking his responsibilities and asserting. And now, again, we all know this is a difficult, like I said, it's something new. I mean, there is no template, but I think he could have demonstrated leadership. He could have unified the country. He could have bring people. He could have relied on his health advisors and just be there and call it cheerleading. I mean, emotionally telling Gambians, these are the things. Let me give you an example. He had a state of emergency recommendation that was voted down at the National Assembly. Again, as a leader, President Barrow himself could have gone to the National Assembly, passionately tell them, look, this is important. It's a question of life and death. A whole lot is riding on this. I want a partner from you guys. Let's find a common ground. Let's see what is there that we need to do. Let's see how we can work on the enforcement. If he were to demonstrate that, I think we wouldn't be in this situation. But again, people saw it like it has been politicized from their end, and then the reaction that he gets from the National Assembly as well, they were politicizing it too. They're beginning to see that, well, you know what, maybe, because let me just give you an example. I heard the health minister himself at one time said, well, with all these things, we're going to use it to help our health infrastructure. We will be buying ambulances and all the necessary equipment that we need. When you listen to him very closely, he's thinking that maybe Gambia will be safe, but this is an opportune moment for us to elevate our health infrastructure. Now, I get what he was saying, but he was failing to realize that maybe, I mean, we need to direct these resources to confront the virus and not to think that maybe we will be safe from it. So from the government end, they thought Gambia will be safe, and that kind of seep into the National Assembly. They thought Gambia will be safe. They politicized it as well, and that seep into the individual average Gambian at Serakunda Market, who thought, you know what, maybe government is just using this to get donor funds from the international community. that kind of a thing. So
Absolutely.
unfortunately,
You're absolutely correct in many ways. But this is it. Given that this is our situation, yes, the diaspora, what is it that you can do in this situation? Obviously, one understands that even with you guys in the countries you are in, you've got your own difficulties there you have to deal with, as it were. So what is it that you think that it can be your role now, given that you've mentioned it, we are going through a kind of vacuum of leadership in many ways, granted. So how can you make a difference, people in the diaspora?
like we've always done, whether it's during the time of Jammeh or just after this new transition came about, what we've always done is to connect back home, to speak out, to put the pressure, and we have contributed financially, even from the onset. Monies were sent, organizations from the diaspora, where it's buying rice, because we knew that clearly, I mean, if you are to observe all the guidelines, the shelter, the lockdown, people needed to put food in the table. And the diaspora contributed immensely. But let's come back to what you were saying. We are where we are. The role of the diaspora, as I said, we're using social media to communicate to the government. We believe, I personally believe, that at this particular juncture, I wanna salute I wanna give props to this curfew that they have just initiated. I mean, the wearing of the mask that they have just initiated. And I think the government needs to even go much bolder. I think there should be a total lockdown. There has to be, this is an emergency situation. There has to be sacrifice from individual Gambians. Let's shut down the economy. I understand all the other countries have done that. It is not going to be easy, but it is what it is. And if we are to save our country and to save Gambia as we know it, some kind of sacrifice has to be done. And I think that starts with a total lockdown, the way things were.
But let me just cut you there a bit. Sorry about that. I mean, you've mentioned something like you communicate with the government. Is it through social media? You said. I mean, I thought that there was a diaspora directorate at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Isn't there a more formal channel of communications between the diaspora and the ministry here?
You have to understand, from the onset, after the role that we played to bring about this change that we call today, 2016, nobody doubts the role of the diaspora. The role of the diaspora was instrumental. And again, their reaction was they recognized it, and this directorate that you were talking about was put together. Actually, we were even called the 8th region of the Gambia. There was a lot of talk. There was formation of a think tank. They believe that there should be this nexus, this link, because they recognize the role of the diaspora. It didn't take long, but I believe that the diaspora was abandoned, if you want to call it that. The directorate, as far as I'm concerned, doesn't exist. Now, we do have a relationship with, let's say, the embassy here in Washington. There's no doubt about that, if you were to compare it with what we've had during the time of Jammeh. But again, I do not believe that the government is making the initiative to constructively engage the diaspora. There is this talk that maybe, well, the diaspora, they don't support the government. I don't think that is true. The diaspora is no different. It's a microcosm of the Gambia. We have different individuals supporting different political parties. It is what it is. But I believe that if the government were to constructively engage the diaspora, this directorate that you were talking about, I don't think it exists. I really don't.
But that was it. We thought that the establishment of the directorate was for that kind of engagement. But essentially, are you telling me that it is ineffective? It's there, but nothing is happening.
Forget about ineffective. It hasn't been utilized. Now, I am speaking from my personal opinion, and I do believe that I am very active. I'm a community activist. I'm a political activist. I mean, by now I should have known. There's no doubt about that. It may exist as an entity. You know how Gambia is. I mean, it's easy for us to. Like I said, there was an entity called the think tank. What happened to that? They actually even bought vehicles at the beginning, and you will see, but nothing. It didn't really amount to anything. So, do we really have a official channel where the diaspora can communicate with the government? No, we don't have that I'm aware of. So, what we end up doing, just like any other Gambian, is to utilize social media. I know there's a lot of garbage on social media. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of nonsenses that are out there that doesn't help the government in any constructive way. But there are also serious conversations out there that I believe that the government can take cues from.
12 o'clock.
Absolutely. But here I'd be inclined to ask, how organized is the diaspora? Is there a common platform? I mean, we understand that you have so many different associations. Some of them are actually, regionally based back home in Gambia. So how organized is really the diaspora so that it can form a formidable voice, an influential voice that the government will listen to?
That's a very good question. Like I said, that the diaspora, we're no different from back home. I mean, in terms of, do we really have a common, call it organization or voice? Not necessarily. But if we're to go back a little bit, during the time of Jammeh, when we're trying to fight and bring an end to tyranny, at that time, we had a common platform, a common organization, because the focus was clear. We needed to get rid of tyranny to bring about democracy in the Gambia. So we all embraced that. And that mission alone brought us together to form these entities. At some point, it was called the Save the Gambia Democracy Project. And then it evolved closer to 2016, GDF, a funding entity that we were able to raise funds that eventually contributed immensely to bring an end to Jammeh. But at this juncture, to tell you that there is a uniform, one platform, one voice that speaks for the diaspora, no, we don't have that. I mean, that is totally impossible. Again,
but maybe this is the problem, because of you guys out there, you're fragmented as such. That's what you seem to suggest. There's a fragmentation. Then that influence you could have heard on government, it's really not happening. As I understand the statistics, the last one I saw, I understand that there are about 26,000 Gambians in the US. Right now, one would have thought that, I mean, for one to really have that impact, that organization, why do you think you cannot have that common platform?
I think that expectation of the diaspora as a monolithic group, homogeneous, I mean, that is impossible. It cannot happen. Like I said, we're a microcosm of the Gambia. We are no different. You got Gambians in diaspora live in England. Some live in Norway. Some live in the US. Even in the US, some live in New York, in the South, in California. It is totally impossible. Some support a political party. Some are UDP supporters. Some are DOI supporters. Some are, call it whatever you want to call it. The agenda is different. What we have in common, though, we believe that there should be a democratic Gambia. There should be a new dispensation. That we do believe. That we have in common. We all understand what inspired us to fight, to bring about an end to tyranny, get rid of evil Jammeh, and give our country a chance, an opportunity. But now to think that, in terms of exerting our influence on the government, I think we're doing that. You may not believe it. The government does listen to the diaspora. I mean, they do listen to us. That I believe to some extent.
What can you point to? What can you point to in their decisions which you thought that was perhaps inspired or influenced by the diaspora? And how would you demonstrate that they do actually listen? Or is that wishful thinking?
I don't think it's wishful thinking at all. I don't think wishful thinking at all. Even from policy prescriptions, decisions that are to be made, sometimes it would first start in the social media. That's where it's going to be baked. And when they start hearing from opinion, because they also know, they know individuals in the diaspora. And I do believe that certain decisions are made sometimes based on what is coming from the diaspora. Let's look at, let's say, for instance, even when we're working on the Constitution, I believe that the diaspora contributed immensely, to the final draft. I do believe that they do listen. I have no doubt about that in my mind. But like you said, if we were to come together as one group, speak with one voice, which I believe is impossible. That is, I think that is not even realistic. But if that were to happen, I think we would have been able to exert much more influence. No doubt about that.
Absolutely. One understands that you cannot have a totality. Everybody agrees as such, but you can have a main group where most people belong to. You see, we can be in the same group, perhaps have different political programs, as it were. We can disagree on things, and yet we are within the same group. This is what really one is perhaps expecting. And then when you said that what is in the diaspora is a reflection of what is happening here, one might think, but again, how can you help in that, in the sense of having that organizational craft? This is what we sort of think when you go to the US or when you go to Europe, because of that organizational ability, which has really helped their societies. So when our people go there, they will perhaps adapt to that and bring back that organizational nous to over here. So one is perhaps expecting a certain shift, as it were, a certain social shift from the people in the diaspora, or is that too much? What's wrong with my argument?
There's nothing wrong with your argument. The only problem is it is more of an ideal. The reality is it is almost impossible. I think in any community that you go, you're going to have a divergence of views, and then you have people with their agendas, those kind of things. And it's no different from the diaspora as well. Again, like you, I would love to believe, I would have loved if we all could speak with one voice and be much more organized and be able to engage the government in a constructive way. I think that would have made a difference or have much more influence. But again, unfortunately, we are not that organized as well. We are also a victim of partisanship, political partisanship. People are driven by their parties. And some in the diaspora are looking at 2021. What does it mean for me and my party? And sometimes that is what is driving their agenda. And sometimes, and that makes it much more difficult. And then from the government end, they are looking at who is talking. If they believe that Musa Jeng happens to support a certain political party, whatever I say is going to be seen within those lenses. Unfortunately, again, I understand what you're saying. If we were to come together, form an entity like we did, going back to immediately after the 2001 elections, when we lost, and we realized that the diaspora needs to shift. We need to actually get involved and get our hands dirty if we want these political parties to come together. That's when that whole thing started. So we came together. There was a need for that. Like I said, because the mission was clear. We had to come together in order to bring all political parties together so that they can challenge Jammeh. You see, so when that thing happened, we were able to at least come together and speak with one voice. But now, the way things are...
But isn't that the key? Isn't that the key? Because then the idea was to get rid of Jammeh. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So perhaps it was easier then for that to be the glue, as it were, to keep us together. So now it seems in a post-Jammeh era, so now what do? Now you've got your liberty, you've got your freedom. What are you going to do with the freedom? You see, it seems as if the enemy earlier, as formidable, as formidable as Jammeh was, the enemy then was really easier than now. How do you build on your liberty?
You see, it's much easier to think that. Can you imagine that when we launched this effort, like I said, just after the 2000 elections, we lost, and we realized that unless we come together, because it made sense at that time, coming together, we would be able to raise much more money, and then at the same time, be able to lean on our parties back home so that they can come together. But it took longer than that, because after 2001, we were able to help facilitate that brought about NAD. You see, we had our differences then, and that contributed even to the disintegration of NAD. So it is never easy to take diverse people, opinions, different agendas to come together to fight an enemy. Finally, we were able to do it, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't like it didn't happen. It just didn't happen overnight.
Absolutely. Perhaps I misspoke. Perhaps what I should have said was the problems that we faced then are quite different from the problems that we face now.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Yes. So different propositions here, different enemies. So now, this what kind of organization do we need for nation building, which is so much more difficult. It's extremely difficult because it's so long term. But what is it that we can do today? That is the leap, isn't it? That's what we need to make. So one assumes that organizational ability, which many people have been saying that perhaps that's the problem in Africa. We've got lots of talented people. It's just that they're not around, that sort of thing. That organizational ability, don't you see that perhaps that's just one of the areas where we need to work so that the resources can benefit us? Without the organization, we waste a lot, don't you think?
No doubt. But one thing now, under this present situation or dispensation, if you want to call it that, we have the draft constitution. For us, our focus is, if this draft constitution is passed, and then there is also another huge issue, and that is our involvement for the diaspora to be able to vote. That's another thing that will bring every Gambian in the diaspora believe that is one thing that we are not going to compromise. Just like every Gambian, whether one happens to live in Kudang, I'm living in Atlanta, I should be able to vote and participate in the election process. Whether one lives in Gain Sanjal and that person has every right to run for office, we also want to make sure that we are able to run for office. Again, if we are successful in that regard, I believe the diaspora will be able to. I mean, even if we don't come together per se, but some of us can come together and get our hands dirty and come to the ground and also make the difference. You see, it is never going to be, we will never be able to organize ourselves called the diaspora as a group to make a difference. What we need to do, though, is to impact and create an environment whereby our participation as Gambians who happen to live in the diaspora, I mean, it's available. Like I said, be able to run for office, be able to come and vote, whether it's during the referendum or the presidential and parliamentary elections, for that matter.
Absolutely.
I think that's what.
Absolutely, yes. So the voting. So here the voting issue. Is it something that should have been specifically spelled out in the new draft constitution? Or what are you trying to say there? Because we understand that as long as you are a Gambian citizen, and with the new draft constitution have really expanded it in many ways, haven't they? Even you can go back to your grandmother, if you're one or two of your grandmothers, was born here, then you're fine. So what is it? Is it like to have a modern online voting system? Who would initiate that? So how exactly do you want to vote?
The modalities of how we are going to vote, I mean, I don't think it's going to be any different from whether one votes from URR or one votes from the West Coast or the diaspora for that matter. If you look at in the draft constitution, there is absolutely no doubt, as long as you're a citizen of the Gambia, you should be able to vote. Now, there's a language in there that we did not like, and even when we talked to the chairman of the CRC, we kind of voiced it out, and that is, there is a word there that they use, progressive, meaning, progressive. If it doesn't happen, eventually it would happen. We have a problem with that. We believe that if somebody from Gain Sanjal is going to vote in the referendum and in the national elections, we should be able to vote from Atlanta. Now, some are saying that, well, eventually, who knows, they may even say that for financial reasons. And we have issues with that. All we are saying is whatever the budget allocation is for the Western Division, if you use that same dollar amount, this myth that is going to cost a lot for somebody from Atlanta to vote or somebody from the Washington, D.C. to vote, it is absolutely false. We are ready to engage the IEC to tell them that we can vote. I mean, finance should not be an issue. We are organized. There are community organizations in every city in the diaspora. IEC can work with different organizations. We can facilitate this. We can make this happen. We see our Senegalese brothers here in the diaspora every election cycle. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So with the IEC, have you engaged the IEC on this? What about government, the IEC? So how far have you gone in your engagement with them? We
haven't now not officially engaged the IEC per se. Like I said, our engagement was with the writing of the draft constitution, and we are obviously out there with every opportunity on social media. This is one thing that we are not going to compromise. We believe that we have to participate in the process because we fought for this process. When the Gambia couldn't speak for 22 years, we were their echo chamber. They couldn't talk, we speak for them. When they couldn't come together, organize and confront the tyrant, we facilitated this. We bring them to the diaspora. We organize. We funded them. You see, there are a lot of narratives out there. What we enjoy today in present-day Gambia, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, it started out here from the diaspora. Like I said, when they couldn't speak after 2001, they couldn't come together. We went to work. That's what the diaspora did. We organized, we brought them here, we did everything that we can. And finally, we were able to get the free Gambia that we wanted.
But now, that is precisely it. So that level, that commitment of organization to apply it in the post-Jammeh era, isn't it? That level of organization and commitment and all the rest of it to apply it in the post-Jammeh era, which would be different, isn't it?
It is absolutely there. We are still organized. You see, working towards a certain mission doesn't mean that you have to have, we all belong to an organization or we all belong to, now, ideally, if we are all, let's say, for instance, we're all UDP supporters or we're all DOI supporters, I mean, it makes it much easier, you know, but that's not the reality. Like, we're as diverse as any other group, whether it's in the Gambia or just look at civil society organizations in the Gambia, for instance. I mean, you know, you have different groups, even though the mission is the same. Would that challenge their objectives? Absolutely. That is understandable. But coming back, there are certain things that I believe that would bring the diaspora together, and that is our participation in the political process. That is to be able to vote in the referendum, and I want to put emphasis on in the referendum, because we saw a calendar of events that makes it look like that, well, you can vote for presidential, but you will not be able to vote for the referendum. We have issues with that. We believe, and when the time comes, we are going to engage the IEC. We are even willing to raise the necessary funds to fund our participation.
And then you say when the time comes, when would it be? I mean, when we look at, there was a schedule published recently.
For now, there's a draft constitution. It's supposed to go to the National Assembly. I mean, that's the first hurdle. After it passed the National Assembly, then it would be sent to the IEC. Again, registrations, when we start seeing registrations, people in Kurang and in Kaura registering, that's when we will demand that I want to make sure that here in Atlanta I'm also being registered, or someone in Norway, in Oslo, in Denmark. That has to happen, no doubt about that. Again, this is not about an individual. It is not about an institution. We're talking about the future of a country called the Gambia. I mean, all hands on deck. We need Gambians living in every corner of the globe. Gambians living in every corner of the geographical area in the Gambia to be part of this process. The future viability of the country is in the hands of its citizens. And it would be a very stupid, short-term political gain for anybody to think that by marginalizing Gambians in the diaspora, because for whatever reason you made the calculation that it's not going to help you politically, I think it's a mistake. I mean, it's a serious mistake. All hands on deck. That's the only way we can build a peaceful, stable Gambia, I believe.
Absolutely, but hasn't this been the key? I mean, obviously, when it comes to, when we talk about these things in sort of abstract terms, and we all want development, we all want unity, we want all of these things, a whole range of things that we want. But yet, when it comes to the practical, the action-based program, that is where it seems we fall apart, as it were. So this is why it's kind of like we're going back to the same notion of the organizational ability, because earlier on you said that perhaps one of the things that the divisive factors would be people's politics. We are in a we're doing democracy, isn't it? So we're bound to have that. Why yet? That doesn't mean that we do not have a deeper, a broader loyalty to something much larger. Never mind our differences in politics. We have a similar thing in the U.S. A lot of people, you can be Republican or Democrat, but your loyalty is to the U.S.
Absolutely, and I think that's where we need to be. I mean, without a doubt, Even here in the US, Republicans and Democrats, they think differently. Sometimes they make different calculations based on what is in the interest of my party. I mean, we all see that. I mean, you listen to Trump sometimes. There is even this politics of the absentee voting in the US. You know, can people do absentee voting? Trump is not too crazy about it because he has made the calculation that that is not going to be in his interest. But at the end of the day, though, if the majority of Americans and recognize that they have a right to participate in the process, I think the same thing can be applied in the Gambia as well. Political parties are going to make calculations, but I do believe the majority of parties recognize that for the very democracy that we fought for all these years, if we're to achieve that, every citizen has to participate. Even during the time of the Second Republic, during the time of Jammeh, in the Constitution, 1997 Constitution, we should have been able to vote. But then Jammeh made the calculation that it was not in his interest for us to participate, unfortunately. You see. And I hope that it's not what is happening right now. But I can assure you, though, we are not going to take it lying down. This is one area that we will not, the Gambian in the diaspora are not going to settle for being second-class citizens. That we are not going to allow. We're going to do whatever it takes in terms of pressure, in terms of, again, we belong to political parties as well. And
absolutely. But here, Mr. Jang, we shouldn't be running out of time. I mean, wherever, of course, we talk about the diaspora, we must also talk about brain drain.
Yes.
How long have you been in the U.S.? Trained accountant, doing all sorts of things in the U.S. We understand that about 70,000 skilled professionals emigrate from Africa every year. And we've seen a few studies that really you need expertise of the diaspora in many ways, coming back home to try to help sort things out. It's extremely difficult. What's your stance on this notion of brain drain? Some of our brightest minds, educated ones, going back to the West, be it in Britain or in the US, and
yeah, I was just coincidentally, I was just reading something on Facebook that Ablai Toure in the Gambia, the Sahel. I don't know whether you know Ablai, and he was writing about it, talking about brain drain. You have a lot of Gambians in the UN system. You have a lot of Gambians working here, like me in corporate America. I mean, like you said, I've been here for a long time. And the reality is, human beings, we all make decisions that are personal. What's in it for me? How does it help my family? And to a greater extent also, how does it help my country? But for these things to work, though, we have to be able to build an ideal government, not a government that we support alone. It has to be a serious government. Individuals are going to make a decision if they believe. And sometimes people think it's just about remunerations like financial compensation. Gambians don't want to come home because of the salary scale. I don't think that's the case at all. Like I said, when we had this new opportunity, this new Gambia, this new dispensation, there was a lot of talk, the creation of a think tank, whereby they will profile, they will have a list of Gambians in the diaspora with their skill sets, and the government is going to engage them.
Absolutely true. But here, Mr. Young, something else is staring us in the face. If you have some of your brightest leaving, then who do you think is going to constitute government? And then when the government does what it does, you really don't like it, but the brains are gone.
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. But what I'm saying is, though, there is a need for us to fix the things on the ground first. And I'm not saying, I mean, everything needs to be fixed and then we come and make a difference. That's not what I'm saying at all. We are also part of the problem. We need to get our hands dirty in order to be able to fix the problem. That is why, for almost 20 years, we were fighting to make sure that we get rid of Jammeh. Because Gambians were leaving the source of the Gambia, I mean, a higher number during the time of the Second Republic, because we knew that there was no way that one could make a difference. So we thought that, okay, let's organize and get rid of that situation, create a new dispensation where Gambians will see opportunities that they can come in and make a difference. Like I said, Gambians in the diaspora, they're no different than every human being or someone who happens to live even in URR. You are going to make decisions based on how is this going to impact me? How is this going to impact my family? And how am I going to be able to assert and make a difference? So what I'm saying is,
you are absolutely correct. But again, another staggering reality facing us is, for instance, if you imagine that maybe a continent of 1 billion people, we do get the statistics, we've got only what, 20,000 or more engineers and scientists. So one is seeing a broader, seeing a broader impact of this sort of thing happening when some of your brightest people are leaving. So then it will make all sorts of things difficult to do back home in many ways. Surely talent, competence, we need that, talent, competence, organization.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, in the absence of having the human resource in any viable country, I mean, that country is not going to be viable. Like you said, you need engineers, you need doctors. I mean, you need accountants, you need competence. If there is one problem that is in the Gambia, capacity, they will tell you that. I mean, the Attorney General, Batambe, the former Attorney General, he's always been saying that when he took up the job, that the capacity was lacking. It's not there in the Gambia. But then, again, like I said, it takes two to tango. When you do not have a serious government that is willing to engage the diaspora, to engage the talent pool, we're talking about even the reluctance for us to be seen as first-class citizens, to be able to participate in the political process, to be able to be voted into office. In other words, we have been discriminated against. And then you are not engaging that talent pool because for whatever reason you think you don't like their politics. That is the problem. Brain drain is a reality. But again, how do you fight that brain drain? You engage them. You do the necessary things. You have an embassy in Washington. You have embassies in different capitals in Europe. Why don't you have an office there, basically identifying a talent pool in a serious way? Let me take you back. In the First Republic, Jawara sent an envoy to different capitals. They were the citizens of this world at that time. That's how they get recruited. People were recruited by serious government to come back home and make a difference. Now, if you do not have a serious government, if you do not have a government that is making all these calculations, and they are not interested in reaching out to the diaspora, all I'm saying is it makes this, because for me personally, I'm going to think about, look, the reality is people are going to think about themselves and their families. I mean, that's just the part of life. In 1992, I came back home, not because of I love Gambia more than the people that stayed back. No, I came back home based on multiple of reasons. Came back home for personal reasons, even though I was making much more money. But I thought, you know what, I want to go home, make a difference. I mean, and other considerations.
Absolutely, one understands. I mean, of course, one understands the personal reasons and all that. But I have to say that I was reading one Nigerian with tech. He's a tech entrepreneur and stuff. Absolutely, going through that the personal stuff. But he said one day he got up. He realized that actually his talents would be better served in Nigeria than over there. So you do have considerations like that as well. And it's just that we don't have enough data on the repatriations, but there are some that are happening. There are some people who think that perhaps the next shift Africa is going to make, possibly you'll have a huge influx of people from the diaspora who would help with the attitudes. We were talking about attitudes earlier, hoping that perhaps, that apprenticeship, if one can call it that living over there where you can't take bribes, you can't do certain things, perhaps that would rub off. We all know what is our problems here. So some people do say that perhaps you need that influx of diaspora who might change a lot of things in the way we do things and perhaps will lead to the next shift.
I totally agree. No doubt about that. I mean, the role of the diaspora, like you said, heading back home, I mean, creating this attitudinal change, creating whatever experience that they have, whether it's in corporate America or corporate Europe, whatever those cultures are. Yes, not about that. I mean, look, this is not, everybody understands that in the developing countries, they need their sons and daughters who are basically living in Europe and bringing them back home with their talent, with that kind of talent pool, is going to make a difference. Now, the fundamental question, though, how do you make that happen? That is going to be in the hands of you, me, and our government, and the average Gambian. Now, in 2021, we are going to have an opportunity. Every Gambian is going to have an opportunity to vote for leaders with capacity, leaders who are transformational, leaders who begin to understand the role of every citizen, whether one lives in the diaspora or whether one lives at home. But all of us, if we go back and elect the same old, the same old tendencies that we've demonstrated for the past 50 years, electing people based on identity politics, electing people based on patronage, electing people based on incumbency. When you elect bad leaders making decisions in the Gambia, I can assure you that it is not going to help this brain drain, because people are going to look at the situation and say, you know what? There's a whole hell of a lot that I can do to make a difference, because the situation is rotten.
But this is it. This is it. I mean, democratic politics is really nice, it's wonderful and all of that. But again, what we have seen in our societies is that a lot of people will vote based on your ethnic identity with the person. A lot of people will vote for all sorts of reasons except the rational one, which should be really the basis of our decisions for what to support. So this is the reality of politics.
But now I am hoping though, medium like QTV, medium like GRTS. Again, we have to sensitize our people. In 1965, Gambia had an opportunity when we had independence. We squandered that opportunity to some extent, one could say that. In 1994, we were given another opportunity. We thought we could hit the reset button and create that ideal decision makers. Again, we squandered it. In 2016, we had this other opportunity, thinking of a new dispensation, a new democracy. And some people are beginning to believe that maybe we are squandering that opportunity as well. Come 2021, we are given another opportunity. Gambians from Koina all the way to the Greater Banjul area and hopefully in the diaspora will be given an opportunity to vote for people that are serious, people that have good character, people that are transformational. Look, you can talk about brain drain, you can talk about infrastructural problem, you can talk about mismanaging the economy, you can talk about corruption, you can talk about all these ailments that is hampering developing countries, including the Gambia. But if we do not elect the right people, Mr. Mboj, I can assure you, this problem is not going to go away.
Absolutely, but here as well, I'm sort of inclined to say something. We hope that perhaps our expectations are not too idealistic. Perhaps some may even say utopian. I mean, because most of the symptoms you're talking about in Gambia, one more or less sees a similar symptom all over Africa. Possibly, when we look at the broader canvas, post-colonial societies were always going to be difficult to rule. So, are we having the right expectations? Which will change a lot. Perhaps with adjusted expectations, then you will know what to do now. But otherwise, some might say that are we having our heads in the clouds?
I mean, I would utopian. To be very honest with you, I really wouldn't call that utopian. But our expectations are high. I mean, people are going to be given an opportunity, hopefully, in a new dispensation. All you have is your voting card. All we are saying is you are part of the process. Make sure you make better decisions. Don't make decisions that our fathers made. We all know the decisions that our fathers were making, whether it was during the First Republic or to some extent the Second Republic. Those three issues that I talk about, patronage, identity politics, and also the incumbency status. I mean, we all know that, but I do believe there is a new Gambia. We have a youthful population. You have the QTVs of this world. There is independent media all over the place. I believe that if we work on, Gambia is a small country of 2 million people. If we create an awareness and then we elect the right people, it will never be, I mean, look, this is going to be a difficult journey.
It's going to be a long haul. It's kind of long haul, isn't it, really, to sensitize the people? That's going to take a long time. So what is it that one can do?
I don't think it would take a long time. First of all, we want to make sure that that draft constitution passes. You see, I mean, let's just look at our reality, our critical situation right now. Because for me, 2021 has already started. The decision-making process has already started. The draft constitution is going to go to the National Assembly. We don't want them to do anything with that. Let them not tinker with it. Let them take it to the IEC and let the Gambians vote it into and make it the law of the land. That is a start. We will drop the ball.
Yes.
Because that would at least help.
But I think I understand that the draft constitution now has been gazetted. I think we heard from the Attorney General some time back, it has been gazetted. Correct. So right now it must go to referendum.
First week in August, it should have been in the National Assembly. Now, I understand this COVID situation, but like you indicated earlier, the COVID is the new normal. So we might as well try to find ways to work around it. This thing by next week, it should be in the National Assembly to be debated. Hopefully, and then sent to the IEC. Again, like I'm saying, it starts from there. If we have a new law of the land, I think that would be a beginning of the new Gambia, if you ask me, my personal opinion. And hopefully, we will have an opportunity to give ourselves a chance and elect the right leaders that will give the country a chance. If we don't do that, Mr. Mboj, you can talk about Gambians in the diaspora with billions that we're sending back home, with all the talent pool in the UN system. If you don't have the ideal government, and I call it transformational, that'll do. We will be back to square one, blaming each other, politicizing issues, and then the capacity issues, mediocrity will settle for mediocrity, and Gambia will just be in the doldrums.
That's absolutely true. I mean, that's one way of putting it. Others can say that perhaps we need people like you to come back and form the political class. Then you have the right agenda, the vision, the agenda, and implement and that sort of thing.
And believe me, that is part of the mix. I am not only talking about Gambians living on the ground, us too as well. We have our own problems. I mean, you can't be just sitting here pontificating and over-analyzing without getting your hands dirty. I seriously believe that if we are going to make a difference, we have to get our hands dirty. And that starts with coming in and doing the heavy lifting. I totally agree with you. This is not going to be done by just, business as usual. I don't believe that. And I think Gambians in the diaspora, we are engaging, without a doubt.
Absolutely. And lastly, even this idea of the diaspora, we are seeing sort of different conceptions of the diaspora. According to the AU, for instance, with them, they just regard anybody of African origin who lives there, you're a member of the diaspora. Never mind when you left, where you came from. Hence, I think that inspired Ghana's year of return when the African Americans were coming back. What is your conception on that? For you, the country of origin, does it matter, or do you go for this blanket African origin, blackness kind of conception of the diaspora? What do you think? Because Ghana has done a very interesting experiment in other countries.
I like the radical view, that African origin and all can be termed as diaspora, like you said in Ghana. They're reaching out to African Americans and African in general, whether you live in the Caribbean. I get that. But in our situation, I think we can crawl before we can walk. And the way I'm looking at it is, let's embrace at least Gambians in the diaspora as one of us, with all the rights and, like I said, voting rights and be able to run for office and those kind of things. At least let's start from there. And before we take it to the next level, reaching out to African, let's say African Americans, for instance, giving them citizenship. I don't think that's a bad idea at all. A country like Gambia of 2 million people, we can open the doors for a whole lot more people, I believe.
Absolutely. So just like what the Ghanaian government did, so you also expect our government to make the initiative, to take the initiative to mobilize the diaspora and then.
Really, that's really what it's going to come down to. Coming back to that brain drain, people are going to make individual decisions based on their reality. Now, if you have a serious government that will initiate an effort, launch an effort, engage the diaspora, I can assure you they'll be attracting a talent pool of Gambians.
I'm absolutely sure. I'm absolutely sure you're correct. That's a wonderful way to end it. If you put in the right policies, they will attract the best of Gambia living abroad. And we've come to the end. We've come to the end of the program. Mr. Jang. Thank you very much for joining us on the link on the video link. And you are right now in Atlanta, Georgia. It's been a very insightful discussion I've had with you. I wish you all the best. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jang.
The QTV folks, and stay safe.
Thank you. You too. Stay safe. And thank you very much, our viewers, for joining us on The Viewpoint. Until the next time, stay safe and follow the guidelines. Thank you. I'm Mobilizing. You've been listening to Viewpoint. Bye-bye.